Hey there, everyone. I'm sitting in the dark here like a weirdo, and thought we'd do a quick review for a book. It's a fantasy book. It's Midnight Tides by Steven Erikson, and it's oh my goodness, there it is. Tale of the Malazan, Book of the Fallen. It's the 5th book in the series. Now, I actually stumbled across one of my other reviews for Malazan, review for Gardens of the Moon, and I thought, wow, that review is really bad. But the thing is, rather than discouraging me from making future reviews, it reinforced that we should really try to review all these books and get some more Malazan content online. Because even if these reviews aren't particularly great, you know, something's better than nothing, and Malazan's still pretty kind of hardcore fantasy series on kind of the fringe. It doesn't really have a huge audience so far, right? So I think over the years to come, it's going to, you know, build its reputation, build its fan base, but there's just not much right now. So let's do some more reviews, even if they aren't that great. And we want to do reviews for all of them. So Midnight Tides. Now, it's been a really long time since we talked about book 4, which was House of Chains. And this is going to be spoiler free, by the way. We'll just assume you've read the previous books, but even then, if you're watching it, you'll probably be okay. You know, if you haven't read those previous books yet, and for some reason you're watching this. So, as more time goes by between reading the books and actually making a video to talk about it a little bit, it gets kind of harder to remember some of the small details. But at the same time, there's a bit of an advantage in that, because let your mind process the book a little more, process the series more, and understand how it fits into the grand scheme of things. And that's an interesting issue, I guess, for Midnight Tides in particular, because it's kind of a weird book in the sense that it's a prequel. It's going to go back in time and explain a lot of the background behind some of the things you've been seeing, particularly in Deadhouse Gates and House of Chains. It's basically a prequel to Deadhouse Gates. So let's start there. So it is a prequel. You'll remember at the end of House of Chains, Trull and Onrak and the group that they're with are waiting at the first throne. They're waiting for the attack that is coming, and they've basically just got some time to kill. And it's implied that Trull is going to be telling his story of kind of how he got there and what happened to his people. And that's pretty much what Midnight Tides is. Trull's story and the story of the Tiste Edur and their corruption at the hands of the crippled god. So, Midnight Tides isn't like a first-person story. It's not like Trull saying, I did this, I did that. It's very much a normal Malazan story where you have multiple threads going on. There's many stories that will converge towards the end. But one of those stories obviously focuses on Trull, and he's kind of the main character of the plot on the Tiste Edur side of Midnight Tides. The other side of the story is mainly the human empire, not the Malazan Empire, though, because this book takes place on a third continent. Gardens of the Moon and Memories of Ice are on one continent. Deadhouse Gates and House of Chains are on another continent. So now we're bringing a third continent in. What this means is that The human empire I'm referring to, it's the Letherii Empire. They haven't actually interacted with the Malazan Empire yet, but there's basically a expansionist imperial sort of effort on the Letherii Empire side. Meanwhile, the Tiste Edur are themselves unifying their clans under their leader, the Warlock King. And we'll talk a bit more about the Letherii Empire in a moment, but on the Tiste Edur side, you've got Trull, and he's really the only familiar character from any of the previous books. I guess there's the Crippled God as well. He is a little more prominent in this book, and that's not a spoiler. You will encounter him in a very memorable scene in the prologue itself. And he will appear throughout. You get a little more Crippled God action, which is always good, because the scenes with him are always very interesting. He's a very cool villain. His all those scenes with him are very atmospheric, and the dialogue's really good. And he's he's kind of a scary, angry villain. He's great. Now, for Trull, his main story revolves around his people, and their leader is going to be given a gift from some mysterious power. And of course, you can probably imagine what that mysterious power is, and this mysterious gift they're going to receive. He sends Trull and his brothers. The Warlock King sends Trull and his brothers to get this gift, and it's in this big ice field, and there's kind of a quest or an adventure that they go on for the first part of the book to get that. And that part's all really awesome. You've got Trull, but the other brothers are also interesting. There's kind of like a ranger brother. There's more of a younger, impetuous brother, and then there's do I remember? Do I have my facts straight? So there's kind of like the ranger brother guy. There's the younger, impetuous brother guy, and then there's, I think, the older, more, I guess, mature brother. But anyway, they all go on an adventure. Things take a bit of a turn, and this begins the accelerated downfall, you could say, of the Tiste Edur. And when they get this gift, kind of causes a chain reaction, which brings a new villain onto the scene. And this villain is really great. One of the best parts about Midnight Tides is the main bad guy, and he's a bit of a tragic character. You will pity him and hate him all at once, so he makes for a really great character. And he's scary, he's angry, he's tragic. Really great villain for the book, and he's going to be important later on too. But anyway, so once that all starts to go down, it basically escalates where the Tiste Edur become very vengeful and angry, and they go to war against the human empire. And that's kind of the military campaign that unfolds, that dominates much of the later part of the novel. So it's all great. All of that's awesome. On the other side, there's the Letherii Empire. They're basically humans, and the main characters you're following on that side, I'd say it's basically a duo of kind of a crazy, eccentric businessman who's, insanely epic level merchant skills, I guess you could say. And then there's his manservant, and those are kind of your main anchors on the side of the humans. And of course, these sides are going to converge in the warfare. Our main human characters kind of get embroiled in this plot to crash the economy of the human kingdom. And it's basically kind of rolled up into this revenge plot because there was a tribe conquered by the human empire. There's some people from that tribe left over now, and they're not happy. They want revenge, and they kind of wrote this business guy into the whole thing. There's a whole lot going on the human side. You've got a Zath house that's imprisoning a bunch of people, and it seems like Some of the ancient enemies or ancient evils or monsters are on the verge of escaping. You've got some weird undead stuff that's going on, like some people are rising from the dead around the Letherii capital. So basically that kind of unfolds, and ultimately the human empire clashes against the Tiste Edur unified nation, and it's awesome. It's great. The battles are huge, epic. Magic is, you know, terrifying on the level of warfare in this series. It's just brutal, the stuff that happens to people. It really seems like you know, the magic is horrifying to behold, and what it does to people, just annihilating regiments and destroying armies, and the slaughter and brutality and the gruesomeness is quite a spectacle. You know, Malazan is very violent and doesn't spare you the details. Well, this is another extremely brutal, violent book, which is part of the awesomeness of Malazan. So, once the war starts going, there's of course, it's a big Malazan book. There's a lot of setup and orchestrating things to get into the position, moving towards the climax. But once the big military campaign starts happening, it really moves very quickly. And it's quite exciting, and there's a lot of suspense, wondering like, where is this going to go? Now you do kind of know the outcome. These aren't spoilers, but you know that to some degree the Tiste Edur are going to start expanding, and that's when they start encountering other people in the world, like the scene in Deadhouse Gates, which was a little mysterious. You weren't really sure what the Tiste Edur were doing. Some of the stuff with the flooded warren, there's some light shed on all of that. But really it leads up to Trull constantly up against his people, trying to talk some sense into them. Apparently the only person who sees where things are going. And of course, ultimately he's shorn and cast out of his tribe and left for death before he meets up with Onrak at the beginning of, or near the beginning of House of Chains, and then goes on his adventure from there. So, yeah, maybe things don't work out so great for the human empire, and maybe the Tiste Edur win one expansionist war and then move on to the next. But you'll wonder, what does that victory entail? What is the outcome for the Tiste Edur and the human empire that they're fighting against? And why is the Tiste Edur leader such a jerk? Why does he want to go cause trouble all over the place? So, yeah, it's a great book. It introduces a lot of good characters that are going to be important later. But really, like I said, you only get Trull as a familiar character here, not including the crippled god himself. And Trull is really your anchor for this novel. There's a lot about him, and you really take his side, trying to fight to do what he can to redirect things in a more favorable way. The outcome may not work out for him, as we know, but it's kind of interesting reading this book, where there's the irony as a reader, because you know more than the characters do, and that's actually unusual in Malazan, because usually the way everyone's talking, they know way more than you do, and there's relatively little exposition in the Malazan novels, so you're kind of trying to understand what other characters are talking about, because they're talking for each other. They're not talking for the reader. Midnight Tides is interesting because you know what happens to Trull. Trull doesn't know what happens to him. It's pretty... creates kind of a tragic irony as you read through it, and you see where things are going, but the characters don't. Anyway, so Midnight Tides is awesome. It is a great book. So a few points that are worth mentioning. Some people who, I don't know, they have this thing where they think there's a better way to read the series, and some people will suggest, well, we'll read Midnight Tides first because it's the prequel. No, do not do that. Read it in the order the novels were published. Don't get creative. Midnight Tides might have all new characters in a different continent, but it still relies on a lot of the information you've picked up about the world's lore and the magic and various things that are really helpful. I won't say required necessarily, but they're very helpful reading Midnight Tides to have this background. So anyone who takes seriously the suggestion to read Midnight Tides before Gardens of the Moon is making a very big mistake, I think. So don't do that. That's a bad idea. I've heard some people even say skip Midnight Tides. That is also a horrible idea. Do not skip Midnight Tides. You think it's not that important and you get it or whatever, but you don't. It deserves a book to tell that story, and it introduces a lot of great characters who are going to be very important going forward into Bone Hunters, Reaper's Gale, etc. If you don't have your introduction to those characters and some of the situations that arise as Midnight Tides unfolds, then you're going to be at just this really unnecessary disadvantage reading the future books. And Bone Hunters, which is the next book, is awesome. You don't want to miss the weight of things that happen just because you skipped Midnight Tides. I can't believe some people have actually suggested that. But anyway, Midnight Tides. So it's a great book. It deserves its own story, not just a few chapters of Troll talking about it. It deserves its own 1,000-page book. The characters it introduces are awesome. The situations that need to be dealt with later that it introduces are very exciting and interesting. And like the grand finale, like all the grand finales in all the books, is awesome. And this one is a insanely crazy, over-the-top grand finale with a huge, huge battle. No character is safe. A lot of people are going to get wiped out, which, as you've learned in Malazan up to this point, if you die, it doesn't mean you're gone forever. But yeah, a lot of people get messed up in this book. A lot of tragic outcomes for people. Even people you hate, you won't think they deserve what happens to them. I'm thinking of a certain couple of family members. Anyhow, we won't get into that. Like I said, spoiler free for everybody. Now, of course, I would give this book 5 out of 5. And once you're done this, you're done half the series. Half of the Book of the Fallen is done. And once you move into Bone Hunters, the series kind of starts to feel different, because it really feels like, this might sound stupid, but it feels like that's kind of like part 1. And now you've got all the background, you've got everything you need to start hurtling towards the crazy grand finale towards the end of the series. Bone Hunters is awesome. I'll just give you a hint now. Get through Midnight Tides and then take a break if you want, but then get ready for Bone Hunters. It's awesome. We'll talk about Bone Hunters again in the future as well. So, having talked about this, what else do we need to say? I'm not sure. It's just so great. As always, the writing is exceptional. I'd say higher degree of literary skill than most fantasy writers. Very efficient, despite being 1,000 pages long. It doesn't feel like there's wasted chapters or wasted scenes. Good mix of humor at the right moments. Brutal tragedy, really good character development. I really like Trull. If you didn't like Trull in book 4, then maybe you're not going to enjoy book 5 quite as much. But if you like Trull and you sympathize with his situation, then I think you'll really enjoy how his story unfolds here. I think you'll also really enjoy the crazy businessman and his manservant. His manservant, there's more to him than meets the eye, but you'll find out more about that, of course. As always, Sometimes rather mundane people are hiding some interesting secrets. One thing with that pair, Erickson does a lot of these pairs, and they kind of have pretty good relationship or chemistry, like the way they talk together. It's kind of funny, it's entertaining. This is another one of those funny pairs that he does very well. Now, when I first was reading Midnight Tides, I didn't really like these two characters, to be honest. And I'm not sure what it was, but they just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And what I did was, I don't know if I've ever done this before, but I changed the way the characters were talking or sounding in my head. And I also changed the way the businessman looked. Like, originally, I thought he was kind of an older guy, but he's not really that old. He's just an eccentric kind of weirdo who lives a strange lifestyle to, I guess, distract from his true master capitalist nature. So yeah, when I changed the way these characters were talking, like how they sounded in my head, and when I changed the way they looked in my mind, I actually liked them a lot more. So yeah, I'm not sure that's really worth mentioning. Your mileage may vary, of course, but I guess that's just a thing in general you could do. If a character doesn't seem to be working for you, change the way they talk in your mind. Change the way they look in your mind. I don't know. Anyhow, great book. So, yeah, if you want Crippled God stuff, it's good. If you want to know what's up with the Tiste Edur and why they're starting to interact with the other parts of the world, that's good. If you want to know more about Trull, that's good. If you want to see some of the old magic, they've talked about the tiles in the hold, whereas you've got the Warrens and such for the other part of the world. This third continent uses the more primitive kind of magic through the holds, and it's different. Like, the magic is kind of wilder and crazier and more devastating, I guess you could say. So that's all cool. You get to build on a little bit of that. Great book. What can I say? I think I'm about done talking about it for now. So we'll be back hopefully before too long, and then we can talk about Bone Hunters or something else. Yeah, it's been so long, or it's taking so long to get these reviews out. I'll make a bit of an effort to try and do some more soon. So that's it. Hope you liked Malazan. Hope you enjoyed Midnight Tides. If you have anything interesting to say, maybe put a little comment, because there's a thing called a comment section that all the videos have, and I'm sure other people have more interesting things to say than I do. Okay, I really think that's all for now. Talk to you guys later. Peace.